The Bible is a revered and holy book in our culture. Even in secular America, it still has this sort of legendary status among believer and unbeliever alike. You can see it in the book of Eli, where even those who aren't really believers are spending their time doing whatever it takes to protect this holy book of Scripture. In our culture, the Bible is everywhere. It's on our phones, it's on our computers, it's on calendars and word of the day post-it notes. It's on still in print in the versions that we bring on paper, and it's on the screen at church. But in Jesus' day, that kind of access didn't exist. Scrolls were normally kept in the synagogue and by the synagogue attendant. And if you wanted to access the scrolls of Scripture, you had to go see the synagogue attendant and have that person lay out the scrolls for you, and in some cases even read and interpret them for you. Complicating matters all the more is that in Jesus' day, 80 to 85% of the populace could not read and write. Now, that doesn't mean that they were dumb or that they were stupid. In our culture, illiteracy is sort of a sign of ignorance. But in Jesus' day, it was simply the reality. They processed information not through the eyes, but through the ears. Jesus' culture was a very oral and a very oral culture. They learned by hearing, memorizing, listening, and repeating. Which raises the question, could Jesus read and write? I think he could. I can't see Mary and Joseph, knowing that they were raising the Messiah, not teaching him how to read the Scriptures and not teaching him what the content was. Scripture tells us that every good Jewish man was responsible to teach his children, the Torah, to teach them the precepts of the law. And so Joseph would have done that with Jesus. Jesus also would have accessed Scripture in the synagogue. And on one occasion, we are told that he goes to the synagogue where he hears the Scriptures read every single Saturday morning. On this occasion, when he begins his ministry, Jesus goes to the synagogue. He rolls out the scroll and finds the place where it was written and began to read. So Jesus had lots of access to Scripture, not just through hearing, but also through his own reading. What impresses me most about Jesus' knowledge of Scripture was that he knew the breadth of it. We all have our favorite verses, and we live by them, and we like to quote them when it's convenient for us. But what I find in the Gospels is Jesus quoting or alluding to almost every Old Testament book in the canon. He not only knew a few favorite verses, he seemed to know the breadth of the Old Testament. He knew what was written in it, and he wasn't just familiar with its content, which he could reproduce word for word. He also understood the driving force or the direction that those texts were pointing to. In other words, he didn't just know the words and applied them out of context all over the place whenever it suited his whims. He knew the words and he knew why they were spoken, and when he quoted them in the exact same contexts in which they were originally given and for the same driving forces and reasons. Jesus' patterns and tendencies sort of put to shame our modern notions about what to do with the text. He sort of shames our practices and simultaneously encourages us to do better. For all of our access to Scripture on our phones and our computers and our calendars and our screens, we simply don't know the text like our forefathers did. We used to be known as a people of the book, and we are becoming less and less so. So let's get into that today in the Gospels. Let's get into the text of the Bible and discover for a bit on our own what it is that we find about Jesus' devotion to Scripture. For even Jesus believed that we should search the Scriptures because in them we would find life.